Well, I've been receiving so many questions about traditional foods, both in the comments and in emails that you've been sending me. So today, I want to answer a lot of your questions. Hi, sweet friends. I'm Mary, and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferments, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, I hope I do my best to answer your questions that you leave in the comments underneath my videos, as well as the questions that you send me via email. But there are some questions that I get that come up a lot, and I thought that it would be great to do a video about them for those of you who may be thinking about those but may not have had a chance to leave me a comment or send me an email regarding those questions you have. Well, recently I've been getting a lot of questions about beet kvass, and I'm so glad to hear that so many of you are making it and experimenting with it and having success with it. But I recently got a question that was very interesting and that I wanted to share with all of you because you may be wondering about this as well. And the question was, what is the best time to drink beet kvass? On an empty stomach, with food, or without food? And I thought, wow, that's a really great question. And I had to really think about this because I don't know if there is an exact answer or an exact correct answer as to when it is the best time to drink beet kvass or any fermented beverage for that matter. But I think that if you're drinking fermented beverages, any time is a good time. But what would be the best time? And so I kind of thought about this and said, well, if you're drinking something that's rich in probiotics and you want those probiotics to flourish, what would be a good time to eat it, to drink it? And it would be when you also maybe were eating prebiotics, because the probiotics like to eat prebiotics. That's the food that feeds probiotics. So if you drank beet kvass with a meal that was rich in prebiotics, that might be a really nice combination. And foods that are prebiotics are generally foods that are high in fiber, and a specific type of fiber often, known as inulin fiber. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, I-N-U-L-I-N, inulin fiber. And the foods that are high in this type of fiber are things like chicory root or dandelion greens, but those are a little unusual and not something we may be eating every day. So what are some common foods that are high in the type of prebiotics that those probiotics in the beet kvass or in other probiotic-rich beverages would like to eat? Well, the good news is that you can find prebiotics in things like onions, garlic, bananas, barley, even cocoa. So there are a nice selection of foods, and a quick search on the internet will reveal many more. But so pretty much, for the most part, if you're eating a meal that contains fresh fruits and vegetables and some of your aromatics like the onions and the garlics, chances are if you're drinking beet kvass with that meal, you're giving the probiotics in the beet kvass a lot of good prebiotics to eat. The next question that I've been getting a lot is to do with strawberry vinegar. Since strawberries are in season right now, this being the summer, a lot of you are saving the scraps from your strawberries when you hull them or cut off the green tops, and you're making strawberry vinegar, which I've showed you how to do in a previous video, and I'll be sure to put that in the iCards. So I have a lot of emails with a lot of questions about the strawberry vinegar, and some of them are really cute and funny. And but the bottom line is that I get a lot of questions about, do I stir it every day and twice a day? When do I add the extra quarter cup of sugar? How often do I stir it after I add the quarter cup of sugar? Do I add more sugar? And is any processing needed, as in when I'm done, do I need to can this, as in like a water bath process? And then one email that I received, which, as I mentioned, some are very funny and cute, but this one I really liked because it said, this was an ongoing exchange of emails, and this is actually from my friend Denise, and I thought this was so cute. She said, "More questions about the fruit scrap vinegar. It's bubbling like crazy every day. I stir it down twice a day, as you said. It is getting cloudy, smelling strongly, and the fruit looks a little grody." But it smells like vinegar. I guess that's what's supposed to be happening. And Denise is 100% correct. That's exactly what's supposed to be happening. And if you watch the video, basically what I explain is that you're going to take all your fruit, your strawberry scraps, and you can do this with any fruit. And I have a lot of videos on how to make vinegar. And I'll be sure to put a link to those in the description below and link to some of them here in the iCards. But basically, what you're going to do is you're going to put everything in your jar. You know, I usually make it in a half-gallon jar, and you fill it up about halfway or so. And then you're going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar. You're going to add in filtered water. And then you're going to leave some headspace because it is going to bubble up and you don't want to make a big mess as it spills over. But something I've shared in some of my other videos is a good way to avoid that, and also this is the case with ferments, is to take your jar and put it in a bowl, and that helps in the event that you do have a bubble over. But you're going to add your fruit scraps, you're going to add your 1/4 cup of sugar, you're going to add your water, leave a little headspace, cover it with a cloth or a coffee filter, whatever you have, and then twice a day, stir it. And you're going to start seeing after a few days some bubbling, and then everything may calm down. At that point, it's wise to add another 1/4 cup of sugar. Sometimes with very sweet fruits, you don't need to do that because the yeast and the bacteria have enough to eat. But in the event that it's not a super not a super sweet fruit, you want to add that extra 1/4 cup of sugar on about the 5th day, and then again keep stirring and stir it twice a day. And usually by day 30, yes, as Denise said, the fruit's going to look pretty grody, but it's going to really start smelling like vinegar. And then at that point, you can use your pH strips to test it and see if it's at a pH that you like. I usually like to try to get it down to 3.0. But sometimes it may not go any farther than 4.0. It's just a matter of making vinegar. You know, these are very perstickety things that are real live foods, and so it's difficult to ever say something is an exact science when you're doing it at home. And as to the pH strips, I'll put a link in the description below where you can find them. It's very easy to find on Amazon. You may also find them in your kitchen stores. And those are very helpful if you're new to making vinegar or new to making ferments and you're looking for a particular pH. They can be very reassuring. But the nice thing about making homemade vinegar is by day 30, it's going to smell like vinegar. And the nose test is often the best test. But after that 5th day, I just want to add this. After that 5th day, when you've added that extra 1/4 cup of sugar, after that, you should not need to add any more sugar. You will see a lot of fermentation going on, a lot of bubbling, and you may see something start to form on the top, and it'll start to become less bubbly. It's going through the process of becoming vinegar, and you don't need to add any more sugar at that point. And another question, and a most important question that I get a lot is, oh no, there's some white film on top. Is it mold? Do I have to throw it out? Chances are it's not mold. If it's fuzzy, it may be mold, and some people are not concerned about that. They'll scoop it off, and then over time, the vinegar will become, or the solution will turn into vinegar and become very acidic, and acidic environments are very unhospitable to mold. So it may even kill off whatever mold is up, the little mold spores that may be left. But I certainly understand people being uncomfortable if something becomes moldy and they just want to discard it. However, that said, if it just looks like a white film, and I've sent a lot of pictures to all of you in email, and I'll have to put one up on my website, which if you've not had a chance to get over to my website, it's just marysnest.com, very simple. And I have a lot of information over there. You can print out recipes there. There's a lot going on over there, so be sure to check that out. But if you see a white film and kind of may look kind of spiderwebby-ish, it's kind of verbally how to explain it, that's probably something known as CAM yeast. That won't hurt you. and you can skim it off if you want and just let the vinegar process continue going on. But that's not a problem at all. And it's actually quite common when it happens. So I hope this has helped clarify some of those questions about making the vinegar from strawberry tops or strawberry fruit scraps, or any fruit scraps for that matter. But if not, be sure to leave your questions in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer everything. Another question that I get from a lot of you who follow the keto way of eating, which fits nicely in with traditional foods because it involves eating a lot of good fats, good traditional fats. But an interesting question that I get from those of you who are following the keto plan has to do with sourdough starter. And I received this question from Laura, and she said, I love sourdough bread. However, I have had to transition to a ketogenic way of eating. Can I transition a rye starter to an almond or coconut sourdough bread starter? And I thought that was a fantastic question. And what I said was that, yes, you can pretty much transition a sourdough starter and start feeding it pretty much any kind of flour that you want. You can transition it to whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, bread flour, spelt flour, any kind of flour. But what do you do if you want to transition it into something that's not your traditional bread flour? Now, almond flour and coconut flour are two very interesting options. My concern with coconut flour, or any nut flour for that matter, is that sourdough starter is often left at room temperature for extended periods of time, and nut flours can go rancid very quickly. So I would not be comfortable transitioning a sourdough starter with any bread flour for that matter, whether it's the rye flour that I use to make my foolproof sourdough starter, which if you've not tried that, I'll put a link in the iCards above. That's a great starter if you're new to making sourdough starter. But getting back to the transitioning, whether it's a rye flour or any bread flour, I would be hesitant to transition that using a nut flour. And because I am worried about the rancidity. So, as an alternative, I like the suggestion that Laura asked here was, can I use coconut flour? And I'm much more inclined to transition a sourdough starter using coconut flour because I believe there'll be a lower chance of rancidity. Now, yes, whole grain flours can also go rancid also, but they tend to not go rancid as quickly as nut flours. And the sourdough process helps, definitely because of the fermentation going on, to protect against rancidity. However, with nut flours, I just worry because they're so rich in oils that you may be exposing yourself to more rancidity than you would if you were using a coconut flour. And yes, coconut flour also has oils in it, but coconut oil is a lot more, as they say, shelf stable than nut oils. Coconut oil can often just be kept at room temperature and you don't run into any problems with rancidity. So I think in terms of using coconut flour to transition a bread flour sourdough starter to now a coconut flour sourdough starter, and one that's more ketogenic friendly, is probably one of your best options. Now, I'm by no means a ketogenic aficionado, and that's why I really wanted to bring up this question, because if any of you who are following the keto plan and have some input about this, or are making a sourdough starter and using a particular flour, some alternative flour other than bread flour, some low carbohydrate flour, I would be very interested in hearing your thoughts and what you would recommend to Laura to make a ketogenic friendly sourdough starter. So I'm really looking to all of you out there who have shared with me that you're following the keto plan for some input on this, because I think that those of you who do follow that diet are extremely knowledgeable. I've just really enjoyed the different things that you've shared with me about your keto plan and about your recipes and whatnot. But we've never gotten into a discussion about making ketogenic breads. So that might be something that would be very interesting to discuss in the comments, and maybe do some future follow-up videos about that. And the next questions that I've been getting a lot of lately, because I've made some videos very recently, are about fermented condiments. And specifically, I've been getting a lot of questions about the ketchup. And what I want to say about fermenting condiments and making fermented ketchup, or making the fermented mustards, or making mayonnaise, which I don't technically ferment, but I add whey in to make it probiotic rich, is that these are often things we're making in the summer. And things can ferment very quickly in the summer and in a warm kitchen. So if you don't see a lot of activity, a lot of like foaming, when you make fermented condiments, you see more foaming than bubbles. And if you don't see a lot of foaming, don't worry, because fermentation is taking place. But you don't want to leave those fermented condiments out too long to ferment on your kitchen counter in the summer, because what can happen is you can run into the problem with mold. And this is something that a lot of people who are new to making ferments run into. And that's why I generally don't recommend leaving ferments on the counter a long time, or in the pantry, or in the crock, or whatever way you're making them, especially when you're new to making ferments, because that mold can be a real turnoff, and then you may never want to make them again. And it's less likely to happen in the cooler months when our kitchens are cooler. But in the warmer months, sometimes the mold can take over a little quicker than the fermentation process can take over. And that's why when you're doing fermenting the ketchup, if you see a little foam, sometimes you might even see a little liquid starting to pool on top. That's a good time to refrigerate it, because you have to remember, refrigeration only slows the fermentation process. It doesn't stop it. So you can continue to ferment in your fridge, and at that process, chances of going through that process of putting it into your fridge and allowing the fermentation to slow down, but to continue, but let it be in a cooler environment, can sometimes really help prevent the mold taking over. And I just want to say a word about mayo, homemade mayonnaise. I don't go through the fermentation process with homemade mayonnaise because I'm just not comfortable doing that, especially since I'm using raw eggs to make the homemade mayonnaise. And if you've not had a chance to see that video, or you're interested in making making homemade videos, making homemade mayonnaise, I'll be sure to put a link in the iCards above so you can watch that video. Now, what I like to do with homemade mayonnaise is I like to add whey. It makes it probiotic rich, and the probiotics help extend the life of the mayonnaise so it can last usually up to about 2 weeks in your fridge and stay fresh. So that's what I do with homemade mayonnaise. I don't leave it on the counter and hope for the best that it'll ferment and then put it in my refrigerator. I just add the whey, make it rich in probiotics. I also add raw apple cider vinegar. That's rich in probiotics. And so I feel that that's a nice, healthy mayonnaise that I'm making probiotic rich, and I'm protecting any rancidity developing, especially with that raw egg. And furthermore, with adding the whey and the raw apple cider vinegar, I'm helping extend the shelf life of the mayonnaise while it's refrigerated. And another question I get, and I get this very often, is where do you buy your bones? Now, I've discussed this in other videos, but I want to share it here because I know not everybody sees every video, and we've got a lot of new subscribers coming on board. And so I wanted to cover that here because this is really a good savings. As I've shared with you, I buy my bones at the grocery store, at specialty grocery stores, at the farmer's market, but my favorite place to buy bones, beef bones specifically, and chicken feet, is from US Wellness Meats. And the people there are so nice, and they gave me a coupon code for my viewers for 15% off regularly priced items. So that's a fantastic savings. And all of that information is in the description below. And be sure to check the description under this video, because I put a lot of information in my description, and I have discount codes not just for US Wellness Meats, but for other things as well. So check that out. And if you decide you do want to order from US Wellness Meats, I've got a link and a coupon code down there to give you that 15% off savings. And another question that I get, which is so sweet, I get this question a lot, is where do I get my aprons? And I get a lot of questions about this specific apron, so that's why I wore it. But unfortunately, this one, oh, I think I hit the microphone, sorry. This one I bought in the 1980s, back when I was living back east. So I don't know if this one is available anymore. But some of the other aprons that I've worn that I've gotten a lot of compliments about, and one in specific, and I should have brought it out, but you'll know when I talk about it. It's the one that has the cardinals on it, the one with the birds. And that's a beautiful apron. I love that apron. And I try to take very good care of it. I don't wear it too much when I'm doing messy cooking because I don't want to ruin it. But it's made very well, and it holds up very well to washing. But that apron, the one with all the birds and the cardinals and the real long, it's a real pioneer lady-looking apron. And that was made for me by Heidi over at Rain Country Homestead. She has a YouTube channel, but she also has an Etsy shop. And she makes homemade aprons and skirts. She makes like pioneer lady skirts. She does knitting, I don't know knitting, she does crocheting. She makes soaps. She makes lotions, all kinds of things. And her husband is a fantastic woodworker. He makes pasta racks and cutting boards and all kinds of things. Their Etsy shop is so addictive. I've shared about this with you in the past. But I bought that apron from her. And so I'll be sure to put a link to her Etsy shop, her channel and her Etsy shop below. So you can go check that out and look around. And one thing I want to mention is, because whenever I say this, she may not have these things on her site because she sells out very quickly. And so I just want to clarify that if you go to her site and you don't see a lot of things, if you don't see any aprons or you don't see any skirts, just write to her. And because she makes all this stuff custom made. And you can even say to her, oh, I'd like an apron with birds, or I'd like an apron with sailboats, or whatever the case may be, any theme you might have in mind. And she'll find the fabric and she'll make it for you and let you know what the cost is. And she's very reasonable, given that all of the stuff is handmade. So I'll be sure, as I said, to put a link to her Etsy shop in the description below. And if you're new to fermenting and all of this seems very strange to you and a little overwhelming, I just want to share with you a wonderful resource. This book is by Sandor Katz, and he really is just the consummate person, like the go-to person for any question or idea that you may have when it comes to fermenting. And this is his book that I have, and this is an older copy. It's since come out with a new edition, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, but it's called Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz. And it's not very expensive. It's just an oversized paperback. And he covers so much. He was such a huge help to me, or his book was a huge help to me when I first got into fermenting. And it covers so much. And I've discussed this with you before, but in case you're new to my channel and new to fermenting, he's really a resource to look to. I always like to tell you a little bit about what's covered in the book in the table of contents. And he has a whole bunch of chapters that just talk about fermenting and so on and so forth, but he covers vegetable ferments, bean ferments, dairy ferments, breads, like as in sourdough, fermented grain porridges and beverages, wines, beers, vinegars. I mean, he just covers everything. And recently my husband and I were on a road trip, And I was lucky to find his new edition of this, and I'm anxious to look at it. It's quite a bit heavier, but this is the most recent edition, and I love how it says on the top here, the book that started the fermentation revolution. And I really think that Sander did start this revitalization of people wanting to ferment food. And it's very similar. It's wild fermentation, the flavor, nutrition, and craft of live culture foods. And the new edition has a lot of pictures and recipes that the original edition doesn't have. But what I liked about this that I found so interesting, and I'll just quickly go over the table of contents with you. He again, covers a lot of discussion about fermentation. Then also in here, he's got vegetable ferments. He has lightly fermented beverages. That's something new. Dairy ferments, grain ferments, bean ferments, wines, beers, vinegars, and so on and so forth. What I really liked about this edition was that, for example, chapter 6 is lightly fermented beverages. And then when you open it up, it's got like another sort of little mini table of contents that goes over everything that's covered in this particular chapter. And there's so many interesting things: bottling and carbonation, starter, wild fermentation, strawberry kvass. That sounds very good. Starter for your ginger bug, ginger beer, a whey, sweet potato fly. I have no idea what that is, and I'm really looking forward to learning. He talks about kombucha and water kefir soda, just rosy raspberry soda. Just a lot of nice things. And then he's also got in here a mock dry champagne. And I always like finding nice recipes in which to make mocktails for all of those of us who don't drink alcohol. Those mocktails can be a lot of fun. So if you're new to fermentation, or even if you're an experienced fermenter, I think you'll really enjoy Sander's book. And speaking of experienced fermenters, Sander also has another book, The Art of Fermentation. This is just a tome. I mean, this covers everything you could ever imagine of when it comes to fermentation. So this is a big, heavy hardback. This is definitely for where if you want to read and learn more and go even beyond your basic sort of home kitchen fermentation of sauerkraut and kvass and so on and so forth. This is really a very interesting read. But again, this book, or in my case, this book, really just served my purpose perfectly for all of the fermentation that I like to do just right here in my kitchen. So if you have any more questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below or send me an email. Whatever way that you'd like to contact me is great. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And if you'd like to learn more about traditional cooking, be sure to subscribe to my channel and then click on this video over here where I show you how to make that strawberry vinegar we talked about before. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.